Allison, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Thank you for taking the time. I know you are busy, a lot going on in your life as well, and I'm happy to have you on the show. And for people who don't know about the Mom Project yet, what are you doing today? Obviously, it's maybe evolved a little bit, but what are you doing today with the company?
Yeah. Well, Justin and I started the business about 5 years ago, and it's just been amazing to see how it's grown and evolved in that time. So, where we are today, really, we've built a double-sided platform that is become the destination for moms, parents, allies of moms and parents to come find and be connected with really incredible work opportunities with employers that I say get it. They understand what moms and parents have to bring to the table, which is a lot, and are excited and eager to hire them and welcome them into their company. So we really operate as that marketplace matchmaker. On one side, we've got about 500,000 professionals who are super talented, educated, and really looking for companies with an emphasis on flexibility and remote work. And then on the demand side, we work with, everything from Fortune 10s like Apple and Google to companies that are just getting started and helping them realize why moms are so incredible and why they should prioritize hiring moms as part of their hiring strategy. So we're having a lot of fun. To date, we've been able to connect the moms in our community with over $200 million in earnings.
Jeez.
And our goal is to grow that to $1 billion in the next 3 years. So we're really excited about the impact that we're having on these women, their families, and like what we think kind of the downstream impacts of that will be.
Yeah, and I appreciate that context. I love having that at the beginning just to give people an idea of where you're at now. I would love to go back to the beginning. And one of the things I'm curious about is just looking at your even like your LinkedIn and your career. 7 years at Procter and Gamble, big company, and now you start this startup, which is a much different thing, obviously. Take me through that transition from Procter and Gamble to your own company. I would love to hear more about how that happened.
Yeah, I'm certainly not sort of like the traditional founder who had like a product engineering background, studied CS in school. I took the business route, so went to work at P&G at like 19 before I could drink. Turning there, and it was actually fairly entrepreneurial because I actually worked out in what we call the field, and specifically servicing some of our big retail customers. So Costco, Walmart, grocery stores, drugstores, and kind of figuring out how do you grow the P&G portfolio of brands in this large format environment? How do you gain mind share in spaces that are highly competitive and commoditized? Um, so I really like learned a lot from that. Started out really selling, and then had an opportunity to move over to Pampers, where I really got to spend a lot more time with the consumer, who was mom on the Pampers brand. And during that time, I just really became in awe of these incredible women that I met with, and hearing their stories, all coming from really unique backgrounds. And then I actually became pregnant while I was working on Pampers with my son Asher, and like a lot of women, took a bit of time off to for parental leave. And while I was at home with him, I read that over 40% of American women leave the workforce after having children. And that to me just like screamed as a problem I really wanted to go solve, because it brought me back to like those women I met inside their homes who like had so much to give. And I was like, wow, if we could really build a marketplace, a platform for her to be able to unlock her full potential through flexible work that really kind of meets her on her terms, like that could unlock a tremendous amount of value in the economy. So left P&G while still formally on maternity leave, and started working on this MVP, and haven't really looked back since. Grateful for my time in corporate America to kind of understand how the machine works, and a lot about like, you know, some of the more bureaucratic management philosophies I didn't want to carry forward.
And from that too, because for the founders listening, or especially early stage, or thinking about something, when you left, obviously, you said you're on maternity leave still at that time. Um, you have this idea, there's a clear problem that you need to solve. There needs to be something here. What were some of the steps you took to figure out what your MVP was going to be, what that solution was that you were going to provide in the beginning?
Well, I've always been like a very market driven founder. And so that's really kind of always been my guiding light. And so as I was just seeding this as an idea, I started talking to customers. And at the time, I thought it would be all like small businesses. So I literally just started reaching out in Cincinnati to local laundromats, restaurants, being like, if I could connect you with this really like talented workforce of moms that wants to work really flexibly, would that be interesting? And just got super strong market validation. Like, wow, that totally makes a lot of sense for these small businesses. So then started talking to customers more up market and cold pitching like heads of HR, heads of diversity at major corporations. And they were responding to me, which was like really cool because it was really nothing more than an idea at that point. But then I started to learn about the behaviors that were driving hiring decisions at some of these massive companies, the need for them to attract and be able to better retain women in their companies. And all of that helped me sort of formulate how we could monetize this as like a business, as a product. And then of course talking to moms, but I got like really quick valid, like so many women are like, yes, yes,
Of
like
course.
it's untenable. And so you kind of had this perfect storm of getting all of these really positive early signals from the market. And then the next step was building out the product. So early on, partnered with an agency in New York, Arun, who owned it, then came in house to be our CTO. Um, and yeah, from there, things really took off. I mean, we officially launched in April of 2016. It got picked up by the cover of the Chicago Tribune business section. They profiled a woman, Phoebe, who had left her job at Google, like great job, to focus on raising her two kids who were toddlers. And it just like really resonated and got widely circulated. And from there, like the growth just really hasn't stopped since. And the business every year has just, reached things I would have like never imagined.
I want to get into that, but first I want to go back real quick to a couple of things you mentioned. One being finding the firm in New York, you mentioned, because that's something that founders are going to go through. Like, do they bring it in house right away? Do they go with an agency? What went through that? What was the decision process like for you in terms of figuring out how you would build it, how you would bring it in house versus not bringing it in house? Like, I'd love to hear more about that because it's so difficult sometimes to figure that out.
Well, totally. And like you have to appreciate, like I had no idea really. Like right, like I came from like building physical products at P&G.
Yeah.
And so this was all like very much new frontier for me. And I didn't have like a network of, technical friends or colleagues. And so I just did a lot of research. And ultimately, how I found that agency was on Inc. magazine's list of like best dev agencies in the country. I got the initial quote back from them, and I like could not afford it because I was bootstrapping this with savings.
Yeah.
But the owner, Arun, really believed in what we were doing, so actually kind of took on the work, making no money because he really felt like this was something that should exist. And so it's like, you kind of get some of these lucky breaks along the way.
Yeah, I've heard that before too in other shows I've done in terms of interviews of like when you have a mission that's really compelling, it is something
Mhm.
that can draw people to you and then they want to contribute, they want to help in some capacity and you can get
Mhm.
past some of those problems through an amazing mission and then obviously being able to execute on that. And when you're pitching the companies as well, on the company side of things, you've obviously now gotten massive companies on board, but what was the pitch early on for what you wanted to do with the Mom Project in terms of what the draw was, why these companies should come on board?
Yeah. I mean, I would say we built a company that sort of had to build a market alongside selling
Yeah.
the solution. Um, and so we've had to get really creative. I mean, I think early on, um, even before we really had too much to offer, we had a brand, we had a mission that people could really get behind. And I had a really kind of good knowledge based on my time with Pampers around like why moms, like having come from the advertising side of it, I saw like how as a constituency, like moms controlled so much power,
Yeah.
trillions to spend, highly educated, highly diverse. 86% of American women become moms by age 44, which most people don't realize.
Yeah.
And so
Jeez.
it was really kind of telling the story of to attract and retain women, like you've got to solve for moms, right? Because this is going to be something that most women in their lifetime will experience. And so I think kind of rallying them behind that mission, you find those early believers early on. Maybe it's a mom who is now elevated to senior level of leadership and, had made those personal sacrifices. Maybe it's a partner of somebody who has seen their partner make sacrifices so that their career could ascend. And so I think it was just finding those earlier believers, getting product market fit, and then showing that this is not more than just a great idea and concept and mission. Like this is a really viable business. And I've always kind of felt that as a female founder, you have to be like a stage more advanced when it comes to metrics than often our male counterparts. So it wasn't enough just to have like 10, whatever that number was. Like we had to do more to be able to get the seed round or the Series A over the line. And I think, ultimately, I think I'm just so proud of like, other people have sort of tried to tackle this problem and we've made it work at scale. And I'm like, damn, like we've still got a lot to do. But like, it hasn't been easy creating a market, building a product, making this work in a way that could ultimately like help millions of people is something I'm like super proud
Yeah,
of.
as you should be, because it's been pretty incredible as I've done my research for this and seeing the growth. Like as you mentioned, the trajectory of the company has been really impressive, and obviously we're investors at Vitalize. And with that, you mentioned bootstrapping early on off of savings initially, not having money to start, and then you bring on the team to build this actually, and also you've gotten some incredible investors, like Initialize Capital and some other people as well. Like, how has
Mhm.
the fundraising side of it gone for you? With again, not really that being your experience, and for many founders that they never have experience fundraising necessarily, how did that go for you? What was helpful in that process for you? I would love to hear more about that.
It was really hard. It took me 18, 24 months before we were able to raise any capital. My husband and I, he ultimately left his job to help me full time because we saw how much customer adoption that we were getting. And unfortunately, I just, really kind of failed to have investors see how big of an opportunity. And I think early on, many questioned the market size opportunity, like how big could this become? And they didn't realize like how universal this problem is for women, and they thought maybe it's just like a very small niche of women trying to get back to work. But no, like we found new moms were coming to the mom, like this was something that was so much big, had the opportunity to be so much bigger than I think they could wrap their minds around. So yeah, we self-funded it for the first couple of years, and then kind of got my lucky break in Chicago, who's been really kind to us. Met Gail really early on, Eddie Liu, who is a board member, and he was able to help us bring in OCA Ventures as well in Chicago, Wintrust, and then Engage VC and Atlanta Seed Company, two seed stage funds down in Atlanta, who all had kind of ties to the business community. So that was kind of our lucky break. And from there, we had $2.6 million to be able to hire, build better products. And so that was with that, we were able to show, I think, probably 4x growth to ultimately allow us to raise our Series A and then kind of continue to see this good drumbeat of growth. Having most recently raised our Series B last year. So, yeah, I mean, ultimately, we want to make our investors proud, and especially the ones early on who had a lot of conviction before anyone else did. So much gratitude for.
Yeah, and that's yeah, as you mentioned, like it's so difficult to raise, especially if you have something
Mhm.
where people don't quite understand it yet or can't see the vision clearly just yet. And those people who do take those chances on it, it's just like thank you so much. And like from other interviews I've done, like some people have taken, I mean, months and months and months, a year
Mhm.
plus to raise funding in their first round of funding. I remember one that always stands out to me is Zuleika Strossner from Zero, and her having I think Charles Hudson from Precursor invest in her after she was like fundraising for like 10 months straight, just like trying, cannot get someone, and finally got the investor. And then, cascades into getting other investors, and you can continue to grow the business. And back to that point of growing the business, then with this crazy growth, like what has helped you grow from that initial, validation of customers being like, okay, obviously there's a market for this, this, to the point where, I mean, last year you raised a Series B for $25 million. Like, what's fueled that growth, do you think? Or what are some of those factors that really have contributed to the mom project taking off like that?
Yeah, I think going back to my earlier point, I think we've always kind of understood the go to market strategy like really well. We figured out how to really get the monetization engine going, and we found really three distinct segments of customers where there was really good product market fit. So I would say, I feel like we figured that out on pretty early, like in our life cycle, and then have been able to refine and kind of make that flywheel keep humming more efficiently, which allowed us to reinvest back into the product and the platform strategy to be able to deliver a better product experience for our moms and our customers, our partners.
I'd love to double click on that if you don't mind around what that was in terms of go to market strategy and then the three things you mentioned as well. I'd love to hear more just because like I think founders find it useful to be like, how did they do that? How did the mom project grow so fast? Like I'd be curious. So I would love to hear more if you can provide more on that too.
Yeah, it's great question, and I know often founders, are instructed to have a lot of focus. I think, looking back, we kind of made it um, pretty complex early. Honestly, having three go to market strategies. So we were selling to SMBs, primarily companies under 50, and that was like a very marketing driven um, acquisition approach, like running Google AdWords, LinkedIn AdWords, referral programs, etc.
Yeah.
So that's always been about 30% of the business, and then 70% comes from enterprise or like large mid market. And so for enterprise, we actually sell directly into their heads of HR or talent acquisition, or we sell indirect through channel partnerships and the software providers that already have access to these great jobs at the Fortune 1000. And so we have three kind of go to market motions to support these. All have like grown really nicely alongside one another. It's hard though, right? Because with
Yeah.
that complexity, kind of focusing on a singular product, and so that really pointed us to becoming a platform. Because really, our goal is to be able to unlock the potential of moms, and so how we think about scaling the business is really like eliminating any friction to our customer ecosystem and how they want to buy. And so we've got actually different business models depending on how they prefer to buy. Some are subscription, some prefer to pay per hire on a service fee. And then for our moms, who are coming to us from all stages of life, some who don't have college degrees and are coming to the Mom Project to upskill.
Yeah.
Some are executive level talent looking for like board level positions. And so I think our mission has been so vast that it's like forced us to kind of agnostically solve this problem, which is harder, but ultimately I think, will lead to a bigger business that can be more impactful. But yeah, we bit off a lot, I would say. And so
I
we've
think so.
pretty efficient in how we've used the capital. And we've got kind of big visions, a big vision around like what this can become, while staying disciplined on delivering in the present.
Well,
But yeah,
going
sorry.
going going back to that, I was just gonna say, like, hearing that though, as you mentioned, everyone's gonna say, focus, 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 choose one. Like, was that driven by just the customers and people using the platform were telling you this? You were just like, well, let's just go with it because they're saying this. Like, how did that decision happen then, in terms of your business model?
Yeah, well, I think what we saw early on was like women moms, like they didn't have one way that they wanted to work,
Yeah.
right? And so it kind of comes down to job structure. Some want short-term projects, some want executive level full-time positions, some want somewhere in between. And so how kind of companies acquire for those different work structures looks really different inside a big enterprise or SMB even. And so our go to market really had to kind of mirror our supplies preferences.
And from that too, diving deeper into that subject, you mentioned like a 500,000 or so people, moms on this. Like, from that, I mean, I'm assuming you have just a ton of data on what moms want and what they're looking for. Like, could you share more
Mhm.
of that for for the companies listening, for anyone wondering, like, oh, I want to use the mom project. I heard about this. I'd love to hear more of like the insights you've kind of gleaned from like what moms do want from work, just because you've worked with so many of them and had so many on your platform. I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, and we actually just have our own research and insights arm
Yep.
of the Mom Project. It's called Work Labs, where we mine all of the data based on transaction history, kind of job preferences, and then we do a ton of qualitative research. And so I think, in terms of what moms are really looking for in an ideal work structure or employer, number one is respect. Like they want to feel valued for what they have to offer, not only as an employee, a worker, but as a mom.
Yeah.
And I think that's a societal shift because I think in the past, women were sort of trained to compartmentalize their identity as like a mother from like a worker because those two were not super compatible. So I think there's just like this cool cultural shift happening where people are like the mom project. Like yes, like this is like a big driver to my career decision. They get this. They understand me. So moms are looking for respect. They're looking for flexibility. And often people falsely assume that women coming to the platform are looking for just like part time work, which absolutely isn't the case. We know in the US, many women, moms, are single earners, primary earners, and want and need to work full time. And so for them, maybe it's access to better benefits or a more supportive hiring manager, more paid time off. Um, and then fair compensation and good benefits are really the top three. And then you get into like career advancement opportunity, mobility, but really respect, flexibility, fair pay are the three key drivers. And then we saw, the pandemic had just such a devastating impact on women in the workforce, with over 2 million women forced to leave the workforce last year, either being furloughed, laid off, or having to leave prematurely because of lack of childcare
Yeah.
or remote learning. So we feel a greater responsibility than ever to kind of get these women back quickly participating in the economy because many of them don't have a choice. Like they need to.
Yeah.
Um, and trying to unwind some of the backslide that set us back decades last year.
And to that point, so you mentioned, obviously, with all these insights you're getting from women, from moms on the platform, and work you acquired work in 2020. What went into that, acquiring another business, and did you like think you ever would do that? Or I would love to hear more about like that. You just like decision around acquiring a company to have that. I would love to hear more.
Yeah. I've never actually talked about this. You're the first person to ask me that.
Yes.
So, you kind of follow the people who are in your space category. And so had long respected what work had built. I thought they had a really strong brand. And what they were doing had a mission really similar to ours. And so I'd respected them for a while. And actually, the founder had reached out to me. I think it was like, was it 2019, December 2019, asking me to grab coffee. Um, and she mentioned that they were looking to sell the business. And we kind of came to mind as one of the top potential acquirers given our synergy. And so took it back to the team, like chatted briefly with the board, and yeah, it just made a lot of sense to kind of acquire them, what they'd already built, the intellectual capital that they had, the network they had, the brand. And ultimately, what we did was we took work and combined it. We had MP Labs, which was our research and insights division at the time, to merge to become Work Labs as our standalone third party neutral research division. So it was a really good pickup for us. The founders are great, Annie and Anna. Annie actually, as the world would have it, is a director of remote work at Facebook now, which is one of our biggest customers. So like we're not working together again under different circumstances. And we actually recently acquired our second company as well. Um, a really incredible tech solution built on kind of community building and inclusive tech, a company called Glassbreaker. So we haven't shared too much on that yet, but we're always kind of eyeing companies in the space and ones that we think could add really nicely to what we're trying to do.
With that, I mean, with obviously this being your second one, then that you're acquiring, the integration of that, do you expect that to always be like separate, standalone, to integrate within what, the divisions you already have on the team? How long is that process? I know for other founders, who may be listening, who are already have companies or have thought about acquiring, like what goes into that, or what do you expect to happen, and what had happened after you acquired them in terms of integrating?
Yeah, so we really bought them for the tech. Great founder, great team who had just built some really exceptional tech that we wanted to incorporate into our product roadmap down the road. So absolutely, we plan to bring the two together later this year. We think that there's an interesting standalone commercial opportunity as well. They had some significant six-figure contracts with some of the Fortune 1000s. So the time hasn't been right yet, but we think kind of a really interesting tech integration play and a commercial kind of more white space opportunity.
And one of the things I want to go back to, I know you had mentioned at one point, like women and wanting to, mom specifically, wants like upskill or reskill potentially. I know you have a 513C program as well. I would love to hear more about that program and how that came to be within the Mom Project.
Yeah. So I think, last year, after the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, others, we really did a lot of thinking like how can we use our platform to really be a force of good? And what we found is that we wanted to really elevate more women of color into the best jobs, right, in the
Yeah.
world, working for the best companies, high, fast growing fields like engineering. And so, kind of the impetus would just happen one night to create a 501c3 because it was tangential to the core business, but also with sort of a separate mandate. So we wanted to allow ourselves a bit more creative freedom, if you will, to really run this through a 501c3. So momproject.org, with the inaugural initiative being to upskill 10,000 women of color.
I love that.
Um, Starting with tech certifications at Salesforce, Google, Apple, Microsoft, that would have really significant impact on their earnings after a few short months of training. So I'm really excited. That's been taking off. We've got some incredible corporate sponsors who are helping fund this. We have an amazing director over Rise, Chandra, who is a single mom, Black mom, who, who has upskilled herself and like is the ultimate kind of voice of these women. And like when they're feeling down or they think they can't pass the test, like she's like been there and she like, we're going to do this.
Love
It's
it.
just like, it's really cool. So it's early days, but it's something that we have so much heart for, and I think just so needed, and really fits kind of nicely into our overarching mission, which is to unlock the potential of moms in the workplace by really specifically helping elevate women of color. And single moms often are disproportionately represented in Rise. So yeah, I'm really excited about what we're doing with Rise.
That's amazing. And I love seeing companies obviously can be such forces for good when you look at what your mission is and then what kind of falls in within that and all the potential you have with what you could do with that. And it's something that just is great to see and like why I love entrepreneurship because you can solve these problems and do good at the same time. And it's wonderful to be able to have that. And one thing that we haven't really dove into too much is like the product in terms of what you have to offer. So from the mom side of things, when they join, like what does that experience look like? I obviously there's a lot in the back end, but for them experiencing that, like what goes into the making that an amazing, incredible experience as they're using the Mom Project?
Yeah, so the goal for moms was really just to create a very intuitive, joyful experience of finding work or finding support in finding work. We know that for so many job seekers in general, like the process of finding jobs is laborious, cumbersome. Like nobody
Yeah.
really enjoys it, right? And we think
Right.
because of our brand and focusing on moms, it gives us allowance to really kind of make it more enjoyable and really speak to her in terms that make sense and are really supportive, really empathetic to what she's going through. Maybe she hasn't built a resume in 15 years if she's getting back to work, or maybe she's a new mom and she doesn't know what she wants. So it's really building empathy for the users is really at the heart of everything that we do. And so the journey starts with them creating a profile at the Mom Project. So telling, and we try to keep it as simple as possible. They can either drop in a resume and we'll populate all of the fields for them. We want to know a little bit about them because a lot of natural language powers our match in addition to the more traditional technical requirements. And then we really want to know what is going to be an attractive opportunity for her. Like, is she looking for projects to join a company full time as an employee? Does she need remote? Does she want a combination of the two? Really kind of highly curate these job opportunities for her. So once she creates the profile, she can start discovering open jobs that we have on our marketplace. And it's a combination of big companies or fast growing startups. To date, we've been really focused on professional work and technology. So you'll see on the marketplace a lot of marketing, finance, HR, operations, engineering, product, less like education, healthcare, more kind of business.
Yeah.
Um, and so she can start applying for jobs. It's really seamless. We've got a mom success team who's cheering her on throughout the way. We have all kinds of features that were really all developed with moms in mind. So things like helping them build a beautiful resume through our resume rev feature, paying for her child care so she can get to her interview with peace of mind,
Mm.
connecting her with a free mentor who can help kind of boost her confidence as she's interviewing. So we try to be really thoughtful of kind of the practical challenges that she's facing and curating an experience that helps her overcome those. But ultimate success on the platform is getting hired, getting interviewed, getting upskilled. So we're really focused on the outcomes. And then for the customers, it's also a really easy, intuitive experience for the small businesses that are on in the product. They're self-serving, and the platform can take care of everything from curating the candidates to the actual interviewing, job offer, and then post hire, like contract worker management, payment and invoicing, hourly tracking, etc. And then for the bigger companies, often we integrate with the systems that they already use, their ATS. Um, so they often don't necessarily want to come into our product. They just want our candidates
Yeah.
prominently presented in their system. So it's a bit different depending on what channel that we're working on, but yeah, kind of solving for the mom needs and matching the right supply and demand and eliminating any friction in the process.
That's definitely one part I want to go into, because any marketplace business, supply demand matching, that's the name of the game. You want to make sure obviously you have enough jobs for the moms, and also on the opposite, it's the same thing. It's chicken and egg problem. How have you gone about that, solving that, making sure you have enough on each side? I'd love to hear more just how you've thought through that and solve that problem.
Yeah. So we've always had more supply than demand, right? Because you're building, in our instance, a B2B business alongside a direct to consumer business,
Yeah.
and consumers are always going to adopt new ways of doing much faster um, than large enterprise. So we've always thought about how can we keep moms engaged, even if we're not able to deliver the right job for her right now. So we think about the definition of success expanding beyond just getting her a job to like being maybe providing her with the resume tips, the beautiful resume, the career coach that helped her ultimately land the job if that wasn't going to be through us. So we have kind of an engagement strategy for moms and kind of nurturing them while we ramp the demand. And the demand's grown by 3x year over year, but still
Jeez.
it takes time to kind of get to scale on the demand side. Many, even at the biggest companies, hiring decisions are actually decentralized. So we're not like a job board where like we go live with a customer and we flood our marketplace with like thousands of jobs, because that wouldn't be a good user experience for moms. We'd rather keep the jobs highly curated and relevant
Yeah.
and guarantee that they're going to be considered than just like flooding them with a lot of opportunities that have a really low shot of success. Um, and so, I think we're now at the place and COVID on our business. Ultimately, we still had a really strong year, but we saw softness in our SMB segment as many small businesses had a lot of uncertainty and volatility.
Yeah.
But we're very much in the midst of the rehiring. And so we've seen jobs growing like gangbusters. We've seen some interesting supply dynamics, like certainly growing supply, but people kind of waiting out the pandemic, waiting for their children to get vaccinated, etc. So it's interesting, but the demand, I mean, really growing like crazy. There's 15 million job vacancies in the US alone right now. So jobs are growing at a much faster rate than active job seekers. So it really is a mom's market.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And this has obviously been about, the other companies too, and the ones you're serving on your platform. But with your company growing so fast and with you raising more and more funding, there's obviously hiring needs for the Mom Project. So how have you built your team, Allison, at the Mom Project?
Yeah, I mean, I'm proud to say that a lot of our hires come from within the platform.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Uh, which is amazing because then you have a workforce that is so aligned with the product and the mission, and it's pretty cool. Um, I would say, and then some of the usual suspects, like we have great partnerships with LinkedIn, Indeed, and then if it's really specific executive roles, we'll sometimes partner with with a boutique search firm.
Yeah.
We use one to find our CRO. And then for the really pretty high profile roles, I do a lot of outreach. It's like my number one job now as CEO to be recruiting the very best talent. And so I just go to LinkedIn and kind of filter for people that look really interesting. and do a lot of coffee meetings and just really try to dedicate a lot of my time to recruiting. And I'm trying to think anything else. And then we get a lot of referrals from our internal employees, which is great. And then we have diversity focused job sources as well. One that I love is Mark. I don't know if you know Marcus Sawyer.
I don't
He
think so.
founded a business called EQ, which is focused on hiring for people of color. He's so great. He's a founder. This is like his second or third act. So yeah, I really like to like diversify how we're finding talent. So it's really diverse. Like
Yeah.
and bringing in a lot. Like I just hired a CMO who comes from gaming, video gaming,
Yep.
was at Twitch, and like obviously coming in with such a different perspective. So I think that makes us a stronger business, a stronger team.
Yeah, absolutely, and it does. And when you have so many different pipelines you're drawing from too to have candidates for you, it's interesting and to see that. And one of the things you mentioned with how a lot of your time now is spent recruiting, and that's basically founders, CEOs, it's recruiting, hiring, firing, and then like fundraising, and then sales, depending
Mhm.
on what you have to do. How has that transition for you as a founder from early days bootstrapping to now? Obviously, you have a much bigger team, and your role has changed a lot. Like, how has that gone for you? How have you managed that? Do you work with a coach? Like, how has that all gone for you, Allison?
Yeah, and I do have an executive coach. There's another initialized portfolio company called Torch Labs.
Hmm.
And I've really benefited from it a lot. And the role has changed so much, honestly, just in the last year. I was managing our sales and marketing, all go to market, in addition to my job as CEO. And
Oof.
so not until our CRO got hired did I realize, wow, that was like so much. That was super unsustainable. So now I'm finally at a point where I can be focused on recruiting, building culture with the company, especially as we've shifted to be fully remote. Just like the way that we operate looks really different than when we were all together in Chicago for the most part.
Yeah.
Um, and then I love selling the vision. So whether that's candidates, customers, really anyone who will listen, like I think that's where I can add the most value these days and really kind of helping people envision what could be if things sort of go right. And I'm a bit of a dreamer. Like I love to kind of think about, so like I'm most energized when I'm with people and I'm envisioning and building. So that's what I'm up to these days. Having a lot of fun.
That's
Yeah.
that's perfect. Yeah, then that's obviously with what the CEOs will be doing. So you're setting the vision, the direction for the whole ship that's moving. That is the Mom Project, and yeah, drawing on your experience and what you're seeing. And I would love to hear more just about where you see future of work kind of going with us at Vitalize. We're investing in future of work and future of learning moving forward, and always trying to learn as much as we can. But where do you see future of work kind of changing or shifting, especially for moms? Of course, I would love to hear more.
Yeah. I think the workplace changes that have happened in the last 14 months. I mean, had it not been for the pandemic, would have taken a decade to get here. So
Jeez.
I'm super pleased to see that like remote work is really now become mainstream. I think there's going to be some people who will still hold out, but I think it's the future and we've got to adapt. So I'm really excited about what that means for our business. Of course, like moms have always been disproportionately penalized by their inability to be in an office and networking in person, etc. So bullish about that. So bullish about the gig economy.
Hmm.
We know that by 2025, half of the American workforce will be independently employed. So freelancers, free agents, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, mompreneurs, whatever you want to call them, like people want more agency over their career, right? And people are not spending 3 decades at a company and getting pension anymore. And so you're just going to see people really kind of architecting this collection of projects and experiences. I think creator economy kind of is here to stay. I think, I look at other businesses that have serviced similar audiences to us, like Etsy,
Yeah.
and the value that that's unlocked. And I get really excited thinking about what the creator economy could mean for the Mom Project. We've been pretty disciplined to kind of stick to more professional work, but I see, so many moms wanting to be creators and builders and entrepreneurs. And so I get really excited about eventually serving that segment of our
with
workforce.
that, I would love to. So with that, and then like the creator economy, gig economy. I mean, obviously you're paying attention to these things because of your business, of course. So what do you think if it does shift towards that, like you mentioned, with like half going to like a more gig economy and more like work for everyone, like being like freelancers or entrepreneurs of some sort? What are some of the potential things you think need to be built for that, or resources they need for that? Like, I would just love to hear if you have any insight on like what we may see coming up, or what you think needs to be built because of that shift in kind of the way people work.
Yeah, totally. I think how people will monetize their time could get so interesting as marketplaces like the Mom Project or Upwork are able to kind of unlock that demand to the supply, right? So
Yeah.
now you have a lot of people using their dormant time. Driving, making deliveries. When I was at P&G, it was mostly moms who are going into retail stores doing store checks and checking for consistent pricing, doing market research. So, like, you've seen sort of all of these use cases. And I think if we can really figure out how people can very nimbly monetize their dormant time, like that
Yeah.
becomes so interesting. There's so many use cases um, that I could imagine that, just if you can really get that supply and demand humming. And there's clearly a market. I think people have settled for less, right? Like, how many moms do I know from my high school who are college educated and participating in MLMs, right? Like, I know when given
True.
an opportunity, like the demand is there. Um, so yeah, that's a trend I'm really, really bullish on.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to follow along, and seeing how, even as we move forward to the next generation, and how they view work, which I think will be a lot different than how in the past it's kind of been as well. To see more people creating and doing different things and finding unique ways to make a living, or even having these side hustles that become their
Mhm.
full-time thing, or if that might just be a combination of different things they work on to have their full-time income. It's fascinating to see and watch and kind of follow along. I'm just curious with you, how do you pay attention to these different trends or things you're seeing? You have this data set of all the moms on your platform, but is there anyone else you follow, or any other resources you look at to kind of keep tabs on what's happening, or just list of competitors you're looking at? I'd love to hear just anything you're watching as well, Allison.
I don't know. I love drawing inspiration from like the non-business world. That There's an entrepreneur and author, Scott Belsky,
Yep.
who I find to be really, and like what he borrows from like the creative process and building process. So I think there's inspiration to be had like everywhere, and I think for me, it's like connecting the dots of like something totally unrelated. Like, how could that work at the Mom Project? Like, how would that work for moms? And like borrowing those principles um, of things would not be otherwise obvious. I really love. But yeah, I try to like read a bunch of stuff on all types of topics, and I don't know, just stay culturally relevant, I
Yeah.
guess.
I mean, yeah, there's so much, right? There's so much to consume. So it's like you're trying to run a business and then also like learn, for the higher level of direction and everything as well. It's kind of a insane world. And yeah, I'll echo Scott Belsky being another obviously great option, great resource with what he's done in the past, his own businesses, and now he's at Adobe, I believe. So there's like a
Mhm.
lot to draw from him. And if you curate who you follow on Twitter, you can learn a lot and like keep kind of tabs on what's
It's a pretty
happening.
efficient way to get information. Yeah, if you really curate it well,
Yeah, that's
huh?
the key though. The curation is key, Allison. It's definitely the most important part. And for people who want to get in touch or learn more, where can people go to contact you or learn more about the Mom Project, Allison?
Yeah, so if you're interested in finding work through the Mom Project or hiring, visit us directly at themomproject.com. If you're looking to reach out to me directly, feel free to shoot me a line, Allison, Allison .Robinson at themomproject.com, and get in touch.
Perfect. Allison, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show today.
It was a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, Justin. Had a bunch of fun.